hello, I defeated the rival form of Typhon, but stuff still happens. So what's up? I'll tell you what's up. The guy who wants us to call him the Secretary of War seems to really want to do war, which, like, shouldn't be surprising. So for months now, the US has been bombing ships in, I would say, off the coast of Venezuela, but it's like on both sides of Central America. Side note, are we still calling it Central America? Is there a better name for it? Probably is. Anyway, so we've now bombed over 20 vessels, killing nearly 90 people, at least last I checked. I don't know if it's happened again since I started recording. And while none of these strikes have been okay, because we're not at war and these aren't military targets, and none of this is how anything works, it's actually happening. Like, it's still just happening. Pete Hegseth has recently come under fire because, well, he put people under fire who shouldn't have been put under fire. We essentially learned that with one of the earlier strikes, they hit it twice, once to try to blow it up, and then again to kill any survivor. That's a war crime. That's a war crime already. And so politicians from both sides of the aisle are like, okay, wait, well, there's only so much that we can just kind of hand wave. Unless you're Tom Cotton, in which case you can hand wave anything. Because Tom Cotton actually went on to defend that the people that were bombed the second time, they weren't shipwrecked. They were on top of their wrecked ship, standing on top of the wreckage of their ship. They were perfectly fine. And a direct threat to the US military. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. There's essentially a report that Hegseth said kill everyone, which is also a war crime. There's an admiral that they're trying to pin this on, saying like he made the decision to do it. Hegseth never said that, but also Hegseth is like, I would do that though. All the while Trump is trying to like not be a part of this, but he's very much a part of this because he is the commander-in-chief. It's just all him. The US government's attempt to justify this is that these boats are full of drugs. They're claiming that everyone that we've killed is a narco-terrorist, but we don't know that because they provided exactly no evidence for any of them. As I was trying to find a shred of anything, I found an article that the White House posted in which they're basically saying, if you don't believe us, you're the problem. They just state, as if it's a fact, that these are narco-terrorists and that we are doing good and that this is justified. There's no links. There's no link to any law. There's no citations to anything. It's just an article published by the White House that says we are right. It's insultingly dumb. And I'm very, very tired of being told that the sky is yellow. So look, like the gotcha that they're trying to go with for this is that if you are against these strikes on vessels against civilians of a nation that we're not at war with, then you must support narco-terrorism. This is because that's like just the way that all political discussion has devolved at this point. To be very, very, very clear, this isn't a thing we have to do. Like we have a Coast Guard. So even if 100% of them were funneling drugs that were going to be injected directly into all of the children of America, we still don't need to use missile strikes against tiny boats full of civilians. Like, I know that you or I are probably not in danger of our boat being struck in the waters off of Venezuela, but hey, people sail sometimes. And boats exist in places. Maybe we shouldn't set a precedent of saying, there's a boat, let's bomb it. I gotta warn you, bro. Netflix is buying Warner Bros. Yeah, this was a big one. Last week, it came out that Netflix is going to be purchasing Warner Bros, or at least they're going to try. They are moving towards that purchase now for $72 billion. Can I please have one of those? Now, WB was not in a great place. They had a lot of debt. They were not doing well, but they weren't actively seeking to be purchased. But then Paramount came in and gave an unsolicited offer to purchase all of WB. That includes their studios, streaming services, and networks. Those networks being CNN, TNT, Discovery, etc. So that was like, whoa. And suddenly a bunch of other companies that are really interested in not letting Paramount have that jumped in. And so we saw Comcast and Netflix also make offers. Now, I want to call out that Paramount was recently taken over by the Ellison family. Larry Ellison of Oracle ownership, his son is at the head of Paramount. That is why CBS has recently been fucked up, because CBS is under Paramount, and they installed Barry fucking Weiss at the head of CBS, which I'm still wrapping my mind around. All the while, Oracle is angling to own TikTok in the US, and the Ellison family is extremely closely tied to the current US administration and specifically the Trump family. So, like, this is essentially the Ellison family trying to buy all of WB. All of it. That is HBO. That's Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, the DC Universe, and CNN, TNT, Discovery, all their serial networks. But instead of that, they went with Netflix's offer, which was actually only going after the streaming services and studios. They did not want the live TV. There was already a plan to spin off those live networks into their own entities separate from WB to begin with, so they're gonna let that happen and then just take what's left. Now, that sucks. It sucks because Netflix is notoriously bad about doing good to the people in the industry. They don't want theatrical releases. They don't want a writer's room. They don't want quality. They want profit. So they do whatever is the cheapest way to get something made that will make a profit. And like, just generally, Netflix is not well known for treating people in the industry pretty well at all. And so a lot of people who work in the entertainment industry, especially writers, are freaking out about this, and rightfully so. But I genuinely do not know what a better outcome would be here, because if it wasn't going to be Netflix, it was going to be Larry Ellison. I mean, his son, but come on. That doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better at all. But hey, maybe now is the time to start getting more into supporting independent media. At all. Moving on. Let's talk about check marks. The European Commission recently hit Twitter, I'm not calling it X, with a 120 million euro fine for check marks. All right, that's the headline. Let's talk about what it actually is. So I want to start by saying a year and a half ago, in July of 2024, the EU warned Twitter, hey, you're not doing things right per our laws, and we're going to fine you if you don't fix it. So this didn't happen out of nowhere. But what is actually happening? Essentially, the EU has non-zero amounts of tech policy that requires tech firms to actually adhere to some laws sometimes. It's wild. The EU has essentially found that when Musk took over Twitter and changed the way that verification checkmarks work, he created a situation that was rife with fraud and scams and general distrust from users. If you are a person who lives a normal life and doesn't follow the intricacies of how verification processes on niche social media websites work, let me give you some quick context. Back in the day, Twitter had a problem with people making accounts that were impersonating some public figure. So they made a verification system where they could go in and put a blue check mark next to your name if you were who you said you were and were a public figure in danger of being impersonated. The big ones that got this were like companies, politicians, journalists, celebrities, stuff like that, right? Now, this process was not perfect. It did not evenly distribute check marks to people who deserved it, and it definitely wasn't always going to the people who should have a check mark. But it did mean that Twitter validated that the person who says that they own this account is that person. That is not what blue check marks do anymore. When Musk took over, he made it so you could just pay a fee to get a blue check mark. So people would make an account like Disney Real and then get a blue check mark and start posting bullshit. And so this was just chaos for a bit, and they had to like undo that and pause it and fix it. It's dumb. It was completely avoidable. They could have just retired the blue check mark. Say like, hey everyone, we're gonna phase out the blue check over the course of the next year or so. We're replacing it with the green dildo of you are cool. That's pretty Musk coded, right? But look, it's not actually just the checkmark stuff. It's more than that, right? Yes, that was dumb. But also, Twitter is supposed to keep a repository of information about who's paying for advertisements so that there can be transparency there. And they're not doing that. And also, they shut out all public researchers from being able to access data on Twitter and do research for things like hate and extremism online, stuff like that. That was just crushed the moment that Musk took over. And so the EU was like, hey, because of these things, these violate our policy. If you want to operate here, you got to adhere to our policy. To which Musk didn't do anything and now is being fined and now is calling for the EU to be dissolved. That is his response. That is his response to a 120 million euro fine to the richest man in the world who recently got a pay package that could go up to $1 trillion. A minor fine to adhere to local rules is too much. Dissolve the EU. Look, I'm not a fan of the EU myself, as in the legal entity, the state entity. I'm not a huge fan of state entity. That's what I'm getting at. I don't hate you, Europeans. I very much love you, and Europe is wonderful, and y'all are great. Clarified that. Cool. I am not a huge stan of the EU and legal entities and shit. Don't be a fucking baby. All of the Musk-aligned people are trying to paint this as if the EU is attacking American freedom of speech, which is just ridiculous. It is a company operating overseas, not adhering to local policy and being fined for it. Yeah, that local policy is not the same as our policy. You're gonna come across that when you look around the world. Sometimes people do things a little different. Now, I want to say, like, it doesn't even really matter if they pay or not. Like, at the end of the day, what we need is a strong restructuring of how social media works, especially for people who are not US based. A bunch of people around the world are using foreign social networks all the time because they're based in the US. All that bullshit about, oh, China's stealing your data, like that happens just as much, if not more, with US tech companies. And it's becoming a major problem overseas. So what should we replace them with? Tech companies that are overseas? No, we shouldn't do that. That's not better. I mean, kind of, but in my humble opinion, decentralized, small, community-based social network systems is the way we gotta go. Right now, we have all these social networks that are these big, centralized, massive tech platforms. Twitter, Meta, what's another one? It's basically just all Meta at this point. With these systems, if you want to use them, you got to be on these specific platforms. You want to talk to anybody who's on Instagram, you got to be on Instagram. That's not a thing that needs to happen. The internet is an open system, right? Like we don't need new technologies. We certainly don't need crypto to have a decentralized internet. The internet is decentralized by default. What these tech companies have done is make everyone collectively forget that while centralizing all of these interactions into one place, their websites. They've slowly conditioned people to be afraid of the internet. You leave an app, you click on a link in Instagram, you're gonna get a thing that says like, whoa, buddy, you're leaving Instagram. You could be going anywhere on the internet. You have no idea what they're gonna do. They could kill you. There are alternatives. I'm not gonna sit here and claim that like all of this stuff is ready to just one-to-one replace everything we've got. But federated systems like Mastodon, or to a lesser extent, Blue Sky, allow for communities to self-host and maintain their own social networks while still being able to talk to everyone else on the internet. Think of it like this. Right now, we have these giant skyscrapers. That's Twitter, that's Meta. If you want to be on their platforms, you have to have space in their building. Now, their building is pretty big and they're trying to build a lot more to house more people, but ultimately it's a lot easier for them to just put in cameras and watch everything you do and sell that for money, all the while shrinking the room that you have in their limited space every year until there's basically no room to move. But damn, it's just so convenient because you can hop on that elevator and head up a few floors to see Joseph. Hi, Joseph. What I'm arguing for is a city instead of a singular building. Everything in the city is interconnected. All the people living there can still go talk to all the other people who are living in that city, but they're not all congregated in one building. It's a bunch of smaller buildings and coalitions and groups that are all communicating with each other, but are setting their own rules for their specific domicile. That's essentially what a federated social network is. It is a community managed server that can communicate with every other server out there, but this one's ours. We choose what content can be posted. We choose who can communicate with us. If they're gonna be evil, we can just cut them out. Anyway, I'm gonna make like a whole video on federated social networks later. Let's move on. Give me your face, Canada. If you live in Edmonton, I'm sorry. Your local police service is doing a pilot program testing AI-powered facial scans to detect potentially dangerous people. So this just started like last week, but the Edmonton Police Service is using their Axon body cameras with facial recognition that is tied back to a database to identify potentially dangerous people. Here's a quote from the Edmonton Police Service Acting Superintendent Kurt Martin. Kurt, I'm gonna need you to shorten that title. Quote, "It's about empowering our officers to be informed about safety risks to themselves and to the public, as well as giving them a tool to help in real-world operations in near real time." End quote. So the Edmonton police go on to clarify that the data that they're training this with are mugshots that they've taken, which is cool. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool when any state is like, hey, so you know when we deemed that you did a crime and we took you in and we forced you to let us take a picture of you, and now we're feeding that into a robot to find you better. And nothing bad can ever happen when you trust a robot. Now, Axon, the company that's doing the cameras with the AI facial scan, they've been doing police body cameras for quite a while. And if you're not familiar with Axon, you might know them by their former name, Taser. Same company. But back in 2019, Axon published this little ditty about AI ethics. Quote, "These algorithms do not attempt to match the identity of the individual to a database, only to identify video frames that are likely to include faces so they can be redacted." Their post goes on to talk about how it's really dangerous to do facial recognition scanning, and that's not what they're doing. They're just doing face detection to see if there is or is not a face, not whose face it is. But now they are. Anyway, hey, maybe if this does roll out further, cops would finally have their body cameras on. But also maybe we don't roll this out further. Lightning round. In a totally not embarrassing move, FIFA invented their own Peace Prize and gave it to Donald Trump. California's energy grid is no longer dependent on coal. It is still dependent on gas, Bitcoin, and crypto at large, but Bitcoin specifically saw a 33% drop in value over the past few months. And finally for today, there's been a record-setting number of bear attacks in Japan, just north of Tokyo. And this includes a guy that was attacked by a bear in a public bathroom. He's okay. Very, very thankfully. But my God, nightmare. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Stuff Keeps Happening. Head to skh.news for sources, bonus content, and the location of every bear around Tokyo. My name is Endeavorance. We'll talk again soon. Take care and be well.